Alright, yeah, welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and for this week's weekly series, we're going to be playing a wonderful little mid-range list. I've been playing around with a lot of mid-range at the moment. It's just kind of, I think, one of the better kind of deck strategies in an early meta, because it's kind of so easy to morph into what you need it to be. And I decided to go with Abzan because it's not really something we've seen too much of in the meta right now. We've seen a little bit of Esper mid-range and Bant mid-range, but Abzan's not really cropped up a little bit, so I thought I'd make my little mark on the world with this wonderful little list. So the idea of this deck is to essentially have a lot of low mana cost creatures which can be picked up with Sorin. There's a lot of little synergies in this deck. Some of the synergies that I really love, like Sorin in this particular case, a 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker who has the ability to minus and reanimate creatures, but primarily we're actually running him for his ability to, well, he's minus as well, but his ability to give lifelink to our creatures, which combos really well with Resplendent Angel. So Sorin can come down, -3, and reanimate Resplendent Angel, and then if we've got 5 power worth of attackers on board, we can immediately trigger Resplendent Angel's end step ability there to create a 4/4 angel creature token with flying and vigilance. The angel also can do it herself for 3 and 3 white as well, giving 2/2 +2/+2 and lifelink, so getting right over the top for the exact amount that you need. But I really like this little synergy as well. Also, synergy with Sorin is Midnight Reaper, 3 mana for a 3/2. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. So if a creature dies on our turn through attacks, which we'll probably be doing quite a lot of, then Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to us. But because Sorin gives it lifelink, then we also gain 1 life because Midnight Reaper will gain life for the amount of damage it deals. So effectively we draw cards for free, similar to Liliana's passive over there. So really nice little package here. This is pretty much how I started off the deck and I built around it. We are going to be winning with Ketra for the most part. A 5 mana 3/6 with double strike says whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 4/4 black zombie warrior token with vigilance, and when it dies or is put into the exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So basically when it dies, it gets to Very Tucked, which is pretty good. We want to see it quite a lot in the late game, which is why we're running 3 copies. You don't do this very often with the newest gods because of course once you've found one, they'll end up flooding your hand a little bit, but we're running 3 because I kind of really want to win with this card. So here we are, we're running a Ketra as a 3 copy. Could just be better as a 2, but I really enjoy this card a lot, so I wanted to see it quite a fair bit. How are we getting to all of this stuff as well? Because it's quite expensive for some of these late game stuff. Well, we have Paradise Druid, which I think is one of the best mana dorks in the format at the moment. It's certainly going to be when Llanowar Elves rotates out anyway, I would say. But yes, 1 and a green for a 2/1. It has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and you can add 1 mana of any colour. So we can actually go turn 2 Paradise Druid into turn 3 Sorin. We basically skip this 3-drop slot altogether, so we can go to Sorin, and he can allow us to minus and reanimate and things like that. He's not going to get immediate value, but just being able to take up and get his loyalty nice and high so that when you want to reanimate Chupacabras and things like that, you can still do it without losing Sorin to the minus tick anyway. So that's pretty cool. We're taking very careful consideration with our creatures here that they're all something that Sorin can reanimate and live. Exceptions, of course, being Ravenous Chupacabra, because I think it's still entirely necessary. Plaguecraft is just straight up not good enough anymore as a removal option in the 3-drop slot, so we're running Chup instead. 4 copies of Growth Chamber Guardian as well as a nice little mid-range tool. It's a 2 mana 2/2 with the ability to adapt to for 3 mana. So it becomes a 4/4 whenever you pay 3 mana on it, and you can only do that once as long as it doesn't have counters on it. But it does say whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Growth Chamber Guardian, you may search a library for another Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So it basically is 3 mana, make a 4/4, and draw a card. You could think of it that way. It's very nice with Find because it allows us to essentially have a nice little mass of creatures which we can reanimate later down the line with Sorins and Finds and things like that. But it's also a nice little thing for chaining creatures off of God Eternal Ketra as well. It's not the end of the world if we have a big handful of 2/2s because we're making 4/4s off of a Ketra. So while we are running a lot of low value mid-range value creatures, you might be thinking the powerhouse just isn't there, but I think that God Eternal Ketra basically makes up for the lack of high power and toughness that this deck really does lack. Knight of Malice here is a little bit of a meta choice at the moment. Usually you see Knight of Grace, which is the white version, cropping up a lot, but I think Knight of Malice actually might be taking over as the better knight in the meta at the moment because of Little Teferi. So Knight of Malice is a 2-mana 2/2 with First Strike and Hexproof from white, which means that turn 3 Teferi cannot minus and bounce your creature, which is a tempo swing that is very annoying and I'm done with. So I'm running 3 copies of Knight of Malice, which can't be targeted by Teferi, and immediately puts the pressure on their Planeswalkers. So Knight of Grace wouldn't be able to do that. That would have Hexproof from black. I'm thinking that with the removal choices at the moment, I don't think the Hexproof from black is necessarily a requirement anymore, since Hexproof from white also protects us from Mortify, which is a very popular removal spell at the moment. So being able to avoid that removal spell at the very least and get in at Little Teferi seems very powerful. Knight of Malice also gets +1/+0 as well, as long as your opponent controls a white permanent. So if our opponent is running the card where Knight of Malice is being run for, then it actually becomes a 3/2 with First Strike and should get through absolutely everything in the early game that we need to push through. We're running 2 copies of Knight of Autumn because it's a wonderful little modal creature that I think even in its worst form is still quite playable. It's a 3-mana 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield we get to do one of 3 things. We get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so it's a 3-mana 4/3, which is pretty decent. We also get to destroy artifacts and enchantments in the main deck as well. So Wilderness Reclamation comes to mind, that's the big one. We can also hit Search for Azcanta on turn 3 as well, so our opponent doesn't really get any value out of their turn 2 play. And if we're up against an aggro deck, we also have the ability to gain 4 life. We do have that ability on Sorin, but it's nice to have Knight of Autumn here as an early game way of doing so. And also, I suppose, with Sorin being able to minus, it gives Sorin's minus the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, or gain life as well, immediately without attacking. So there's a nice little bit of utility synergy there as well. Obnixilus's Cruelty is a removal spell that I'm testing out at the moment, but I think it's really good. A 3-mana instant speed, target creature gets -5/-5 until the end of the turn, and if that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So it's Graveyard Hate. Any creature we kill with Obnixilus's Cruelty is not going into the graveyard, so our opponent's finalities are not going to be too great. We don't see this card too much anymore, but still, hating on graveyard's not the worst thing in the world. It also hits the vast majority of big creatures, big bombs that our opponent may have, and as an added little bonus, it also hits the Jeskai Super Friends list that uses Sarkhan to finish you off with Planeswalkers. As long as they don't have Little Teferi in play, then we actually get to use Obnixilus's Cruelty to target our opponent's Planeswalkers and just wipe them off the board with the Cruelty. So that's going to be our one way of doing it at instant speed. Other than that though, we are running Ravenous Chupacabra as our removal source. I just thought I would need some instant speed removal, so maybe we want a 2-2 split here, but we do have Cruelty in the sideboard as well as another 2 copies just in case that ends up being the case. Just more removal is very nice. Now, this is an interesting one, and it is a one-of, because I think it's very situational as to when it's good, but it's also a wonderful value creature if it can get down. Storev Devkarin Lich, a 1 black and green 5/4 with trample, so really well statted. A trampler for 4 mana with 5 power is going to get its combat damage in, and that's very important because the use for this card is basically a Golgari Finebroker every turn, in a nutshell, if we can manage to get through, which hopefully with Chups, Obnixilus's Cruelties, and things like that, we should be able to push through the damage. Most creatures in this format are 4 toughness or less as well, so even if Storev dies in the attack, we still get that trigger. And what is that trigger? Well, we get to either return a creature or Planeswalker card from our graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. So pretty much, if it didn't die in combat, we can bring it back. So if it died first main, we can bring it back. If it died last turn, we can bring it back. That kind of idea. So we use Storiv to get back Sorin. Sorin can tick up and then tick down later to get back Storiv if it ends up dying. So it's a nice little value play. And we're running 3 different Planeswalkers, which you can hit, as well as lots of little creatures as well, all with their own individual little bit of value groups as well. Speaking of, we're running a copy of Vivian Reed. I might think about running 2 copies of Vivian, but right now I only have the 1, so I'm just going to be testing her out. She should be pretty good in this deck, honestly. 5 mana, 5 loyalty Planeswalker. I'm sure many of you know what she does by now. Her tick up allows us to look at 4 cards of our library, reveal a creature or a land, which is the vast majority of our deck, and put them into our hand, the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we get to pick out our utility creatures that are quite useful. We are running 26 creatures and 24 lands, so the odds of missing are next to impossible, honestly. So I think we run just enough cards for this to never really whiff. The -3 allows us to also hate on artifacts, enchantments, or creatures with flying. Creatures with flying is kind of one of our weaknesses, I would say. We still have Chupacabra and Resplendent Angel to block, and I guess Obnix's Cruelty for Lyra, but being able to pick out a flyer like a Hydroid Crisis is quite nice with the -3. Her -8 allows us to give creatures we control +2/+2, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible until the rest of time. So if we're generating lots of 4/4s with Indestructible off of Eternal Ketra, that's going to be pretty good, but just giving Indestructible to all of our stuff and +2/+2 gets rid of, as I mentioned earlier, that low power disadvantage that we might be having with our early game creatures. So if we can get there, we should be able to win, but I wouldn't say it is set in stone. What is set in stone, though, is Liliana's Ultimate. Her -9 allows us to choose a permanent type for our opponent, and they choose each permanent type and sacrifice the rest. So they get to keep 1 land, 1 enchantment, 1 artifact, 1 planeswalker, 1 creature, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's basically going to end the game because we, on the destruction of lands alone, basically run our opponent out of resources, and we should be able to run through with whatever we've got left at that point. But yeah, Liliana, Dreadhorde General, a 6 mana, 6 loyalty planeswalker. We're running her for all sorts of different reasons, to be honest. Her passive allows us to draw cards when our creatures die, which is not too bad at all. We can just run them right into our opponent's stuff, bring them back with fine finality, Sorin, and not really worry too much drawing cards as we go. We can also protect her using the +1 to give us a 2/2 black zombie creature token, so a tick up protects her, which is really nice. Really nice and wonderful. The -4 says each player sacrifices 2 creatures. Now this will probably end up hurting us a little bit on the creature front, because we don't often have 2 creatures in play that are just cannon fodder. In the late game we might have a Paradise Druid or a 4/4 token hanging around, so it's not the end of the world. But for the most part, I think it probably will be a little bit awkward when we fire that off. However, we do get compensated a little bit as well, because the passive does trigger off the -4. So we'll be drawing 2 cards, killing 2 creatures, but losing 2 in the process. So I think it's still a nice little trade-off all the same. And finally, as I mentioned, Fine Finality. The Fine side allows us to return creature cards, so if we want our Chupacabras back, our Angels back, we can pull those along. But the reason why I'm running this card, honestly, is for Finality. It's a 6 mana sorcery, and it's our board wipe of choice, because black doesn't really have decent board wipes, but Golgari, on the other hand, has a -4/-4, so a 6 mana Languish is all the rage for me. And being able to put counters on creatures a creature we control is actually really relevant. We can stick 2 counters on God Eternal Ketra, and she gets to swing with 2 for 2 damage on her the first attack, and then she goes up to a whopping 5 damage double striking after that, so really powerful there. We can also stick the counters on a Growth Chamber Guardian, which triggers the adapt trigger there as well, so we could turn this into a 6/6, which would survive the finality and allow us to swing through yet again. Most of the stuff, though, is going to end up dying, I would imagine, but yeah, just being able to stick the counters on something and actually have it do something relevant is pretty nice. The mana base speaks for itself, really. We are a base Golgari deck, splashing white for Night of Autumn, Resplendent Angel, Ketra, so we don't really need too many white sources, so we're running the full play set of Overgrown Tomb and Woodland Cemetery, and then a nice split of the white-based lands as well, so 3 Godless Shrines, 2 Isolated Chapels, 3 Sunpetal Groves, and 4 Temple Gardens. We want a nice chunk of white mana though, because we do kind of want turn 3 and turn 4 white mana. We do have Paradise Druid to fix our mana as well, so it's not the end of the world. I am running 4 basics here, purely for Settle the Wreckage. I've been getting had quite a fair bit, so it's nice to have some basics in the deck at the moment. I think greedy mana bases are getting a little bit punished in the meta right now. But yeah, Settle doesn't show up too often, but if it does, we're not going to get too badly done to, and it should ramp us right up into all of our top end stuff as well if we end up getting settled in the late game. So that's essentially the main deck. The sideboard has a few pieces for a few different matchups. Against control, we have 4 copies of Duress. 1 black mana, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land from it, and that player discards that card. So we can hit planeswalkers, counter spells, things like that. Sorcery speed, so we don't really have to worry about little Tef. If we can take him out though, it's very nice, wonderful little tempo swing for us. So all the Super Friends decks, you bring this in against, Esper Control, things like that. Maybe combo decks like Wilderness Reclamations as well. Really useful. So we're running the full 4 copies of that. 2 copies of Elder Spell, double black for a sorcery, says destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control and put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. There are a lot of Super Friends decks going around at the moment, so we have Abzan Midrange is kind of Super Frenzy in some cases. We also have the Jeskai one with the Sarkhan Wincon as well, so we get to wipe off 3 or 4 planeswalkers for 2 mana, which is disgustingly good as well. And we can also put the loyalty counters on our planeswalkers as well, which is not irrelevant. If we get to the -9 on Liliana, we'll just win on the spot. So if we can Elder Spell with a planeswalker in play as well, that's going to be absolutely superb. We have 2 copies of D-Spark. 1 white and 1 black, instant speed. It says exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater, so we can hit Wilderness Reclamation, Big Teferi, that kind of thing. I've not actually brought this in too often, so it might actually only be a 1-of in this list, but I'm trying it out as a 2-of for now. I've been a wee bit disappointed with it, but I feel like I'm just not really hitting the right matchups that I should be hitting with this card. And honestly, I think it is very useful against like Wilderness Reclamation decks, just being able to take that out. It's one of our ways of dealing with their combo, since we can't run things like Unmoored Ego for Nexus of Fate. 1 copy of Shieldmare for the red decks, 1 white for a 2/3. Cannot be blocked by red creatures, not entirely relevant. But when Shieldmare enters the battlefield or becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you gain 3 life. So it's basically a life gain swing for us, and it blocks most things in mono red, most things in the Gruul aggro lists as well. And if our opponent wants to fight or remove it, then we gain some more life, which then Sorin can reanimate it later down the line because it's 3 mana, which is pretty sweet. As I mentioned, we have 2 copies of Obnixious Cruelty in the sideboard for the Sarkhan mid-rangey matchups. If we can take down those planeswalkers, that's pretty good for us. Other than that though, it's just a really decent removal spell, gets rid of a lot of stuff. If you get your Adanto Vanguards coming at you with Indestructible, you can just -5 them. It also hits Gideon as well in the mono-white aggro matchups as well, so I'd bring it in for that. 1 copy of Night of Autumn. If we do come up against Wilderness Reclamation, we get the Artifact and Enchantment removal. I would also bring it in against the aggro matchups for a 2/1, which gains us 4 life. It's a really nice swing. And as long as it allows us to get to our late game, we shouldn't really have a problem with the aggro matchups at that point. Maybe the burn side of it could be an issue, but I think if we can get Sorin down with a decent board state, the lifelink will win us the game on the spot. So I'm just basically trying to get my way there against the aggro matchups, and I think maybe just a 4 life gain there is going to be all we really need. We have a copy of Lyra Dawnbringer as well. 5 mana for a 5/5 flying, first strike, and lifelink. Gives other angels we control +1/+1 and lifelink, so it will pump up the Resplendent Angel. That's about all it will do. I used to have a Shalai in this list, but she just never really got her use, to be honest. So I ended up cutting her. But yeah, just nice little incidental bit of synergy, but honestly she's pretty much just the Baneslayer Angel we all want her to be. Against Drake matchups, you will stonewall them. Against the mono-blue tempo list, if they've got any of their creatures with Curious Obsession flying in the air, she will block absolutely every single one of them. and the lifelink is really good against the aggro matchups. Again, we'll stabilize as soon as we resolve a Lyra, most likely. Finally, 2 copies of Carnage Tyrant for the control matchups, a 6-mana 7/6 with Trample and Hexproof. The big thing is that it cannot be countered and cannot be bounced by Little Teferi or tucked with Big Teferi, so really demands a board wipe or they lose. So yep, that's essentially the deck, guys. I hope you enjoy this particular list. It's a lot of fun to pilot, so hope you guys check it out yourselves if you have the cards. Link to the deck list is down in the description, as well as game number 1. Hope you guys enjoy that one. If you do enjoy this deck tech as well, it would greatly appreciate it if you actually hit that like button and subscribe as well on the video. It lets me know what kind of content you're interested in seeing, as well as helping the video for its wonderful, wonderful YouTube analytics, because everybody loves that kind of side to it, doesn't they? But yeah, other than that, hit bell icon as well. That'll give you notifications when new videos go live on the channel. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you all in the games. Ta-ra.